Well, welcome everyone. I hope everybody had a good week. Jesse said the church bells have rung at his place, so we'll start. Um, that's the noticing. Um, uh, and this is the 8th session of the community practice. We have 2 more, and we'll talk a little bit about what they will include in a few seconds here. And again, I want to just start by saying thank you to all of you who are co-sponsors of the community practice. We really appreciate your support. And once again, to reiterate the message that it is community that is the medicine we're going to need as the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity catastrophe gets worse, and it will, because this is how humans have dealt with complex problems. We've banded together and responded creatively to solve those, and we can do it again now. So please always remember that if we can pass on trauma through generations, as humans have done for a long time, then we can also pass on healing and transformation resilience. And that's what we're trying to do. That's our mission, to build these community resilience networks that begin to build and sustain mental wellness and resilience. Just very briefly, I want to go back and recap what we talked about last week. And we focused on the 4th foundational focus of building population-level mental wellness and transformation resilience. And that is to regularly engage residents in specific practices that build and sustain mental wellness and resilience. And this has to do with a public health approach to preventing and healing mental health and psychosocial problems, which really tries to focus on transforming norms, attitudes, health, habits, behaviors, et cetera, using multi-systemic, in other words, a number of different approaches, different for the populations. So as residents engage in the 4 other foundational areas we've talked about, or today we'll talk about the other one, it's really important to try to find out from an age and culturally appropriate way what kind of practices really will help local residents build and sustain their capacity for mental wellness and resilience. Our research focused on or identified 6 different practices were really important. Laughing often, finding ways to just help people laugh, even laugh at the state of human nature. We got to laugh at ourselves a lot. Practicing forgiveness for others and for ourselves. Keep learning. Even Father Abernathy last week talked about how important that was, but that people can't learn much when they're traumatized, when they're stressed, because they retreat into this self-protective survival mode. Being grateful for what you have, what are given to you, the friends you have, caring for your body, including providing that vital food, shelter, water, et cetera, but also taking other cares. And then, as James Baraz talked about, finding simple joys, ways to enjoy and find joy in different things. And what these do is these practices shift our attention away from distress and anger and hopelessness. It actually consciously, cognitively shifts our focus to building resilience and hope. And as with so many of the other actions we've talked about, they're most powerful when done with others at the grassroots and community level. That you can do them alone by all means, but even more powerful when you do those in groups with friends, families, neighbors, et cetera, in the resilience coordinating networks. So today we're going to focus on the 5th foundational area that our research identified was going to be really vital as the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity catastrophe accelerates, and that is to establish opportunities for residents to heal their trauma. The first 4 were really about preventing them in many ways, but also in healing, because healing is integrated into the prevention strategies. This is specifically on healing, and we're very honored to have 2 wonderful presenters today. Elaine Miller-Karras, many of you might know. She's the co-founder and now head of innovation, director of innovation, I guess, at the Trauma Resource Institute. And she's also one of the original co-founders of the International Transformation Resilience Coalition and one of the core members of it. And Dr. Kenneth Thompson, the CEO of the Visible Hands Collaborative. I hope he can make it. I have not heard from him. I hope Ken is going to be here. Before we get into all that, let's start with just a brief resilience pause. And again, if it resonates with you or whatever method you want to use, just spend a moment sort of observing yourself objectively. What's going on in your body, in your mind, in your emotions. And again, the analogy I use is like you're looking down through a skylight, the roof at yourself. What do you see? But you can use whatever method you want. And just get a sense of, is there tension in your body? Where is it? What's going on in your mind? Are you racing somewhere? Are you thinking about something else? How do you feel emotionally? Are you anxious? Are you feeling calm? Just pay attention to that for a second. And then let's just focus on trying to identify our healing resources. So think back to a time when you were very distressed or traumatized in some way. Can you just bring that to mind in a safe way? It might have been something with your family, something at work, something that just happened to you personally, something going on in the world. And if you were able to heal after that event, in whatever way you define that, what were the most helpful elements? Can you think back and figure what was most helpful in allowing you to heal from that distressing or traumatizing event? For example, was it having an individual or group you trusted to talk with, somebody you really trusted? Was it a physically and emotionally safe and supportive environment to be in? Were there specific skills or strengths you brought to bear? Let's try to consider that. What helped you heal? And the more you can be clear about the resources you have that helped you heal or that you developed, and how you can strengthen and maintain those resources in the future was really going to be important, will always be important. And this is something you can also help people you work with in the community and in your neighborhood identify that they have resources to help them heal, and helping them become cognizant of that and identify them and try to strengthen them and maintain them will be very critical. So we're going to go into a 10-minute breakout room now, just to, as we normally do, just to get you to connect with some other folks on the line here. Christian will post these in chat for you, but just share in 1 word, 2 words, how you feel right now. Did you practice a purposing skill that we talked about the last couple of weeks, last week? And did you develop your own purposing safety plan, as we briefly talked about? And if so, what did you experience? And what stood out from Father Paul Abernathy and James Baraz's presentations last week? Questions, issues, what really did you take away from that? And did you share that information with other people that you're talking with or want to talk with about forming a resilience coordinating network? Did you decide or discuss how you can engage residents in similar kinds of activities? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jesse, and we will break you up into breakout rooms, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thanks.
Pressed one wrong button there. My apologies. All right. Creating the breakout rooms now. Looking forward to seeing everybody very soon.
Now cartoon.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had good conversations. And again, we apologize for only having 10 minutes, but we wish we had a lot longer, but we have more to do today. But if you have comments, anything that stood out, any particular issues, questions, et cetera, please put them in chat. And Christian will try to gather those, and we'll get to those in question and answer down the road here. So just want to recap again what we're doing here in the community practice. After the first session was the overview. The first focus was on how to organize a resilience coordinating council or network. The second session was on how to begin to build a community capacity. We heard from some great speakers on that. And the last 4 sessions have talked about how to build social connections across boundaries in your community, how to create supportive, engage residents in creating supportive physical, economic, and ecological conditions, Then we talked about how to build universal mental wellness resilience, help everyone become trauma and resilience informed. Last week, we talked about fostering engagement in activities that promote wellness and resilience. That is mental wellness resilience literacy. And today we're going to talk about establishing ongoing opportunities for residents to heal their traumas. The last two sessions, we're going to switch around a little bit. We're going to have next week, we'll have a panel of leaders from community-based initiatives that it will just be open to questions from all of you. So be prepared for questions. You've heard from some of them, but there'll be some new people. Reb McKenzie, who's one of the participants here, is going to present a project that she developed as a result of being part of the community practice in the past, maybe to inspire some of you. And we're going to talk about how to develop your own action plans for organizing Resilience Coordinating Network. Then the following Thursday, we'll have a special session just on the role of government. There's two government officials who will be joining us to talk about how they support and encourage and help fund these community resilience networks. And then the last week, we'll share and discuss the action plans. We'll talk about problem solving and next steps, including the Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network Commissioning Program that's going to be launched, that we're all going to launch to help organize and fund and commission, basically certify local networks down the future. And again, we've talked about these other 4 areas. I just want everybody to remember that all 5 of these foundational areas that we talked about are really interconnected. So as you help people heal, that should be part of the other 4 areas, building social connections, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a linear process. So I just want to talk very briefly about healing. What does this mean? And then we're going to hear from 2 really outstanding presenters about different ways to do this. But first, as we've talked about a number of times, as distressing as it is to think about, we've got to come to terms with reality that the climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe is just going to get considerably worse, and it's going to go on for decades. There's no way we can stop that. What we can do if we reduce emissions and restore ecological systems is keep the temperatures from rising above 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees, and then begin to bring it back down. But that will take decades. So the mix of toxic stresses and disasters that are going to continue to accelerate are going to cause billions of people to experience depression, anxiety, grief, hopelessness, and other social, psychological, and emotional and behavioral problems. But for most of most people, these feelings are not really going to be symptoms of psychopathology. They're going to be normal reactions to very dysfunctional and sometimes frightening external conditions. So rather than pathologizing people, it's going to be really important for resilience coordinating networks to help everyone understand that their distress is perfectly natural, given the state of the world, and that their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are instinctive coping mechanisms that likely went wrong often if they start to cause self-harm or harm to others. So establishing these group and community minding healing opportunities that we're going to hear about is really important. If you help people engage in the other 4 foundational areas we've talked about, many people will be able to heal themselves. If you're connected with others, you have those social support networks, you understand what's going on within you, your trauma and resilience informed, et cetera, you're going to be able to, in many ways, heal yourself. But many other people are still certain to be and remain traumatized and are going to need support. And healing for many people can be difficult because traumatized people often feel hopeless, as you all know, and believe they have no control over their lives. And consequently, they won't understand what they are experiencing or what to do. And often, as you heard from Father Abernathy last week, but we all know, all they can do is attend to their own needs, seriously traumatized people, finding food, shelter, sufficient funds, et cetera. And again, sometimes adopt coping mechanisms that initially made sense, but eventually go awry. So this is why Resilience Coordinating Networks must really take the lead in establishing ongoing opportunities for people to heal their traumas. And what is healing involved? Judith, there's many ways to think about it. Judith Herman describes it as having three basic stages: safety, acknowledgement, and resolution or reconnection. People cannot heal most of the time until they feel physically and emotionally safe and supported. So individual and group and community support, social connections and other things, and providing key resources to them, food, water, shelter, is thus going to be really essential to start the healing process. And when people feel safe and supportive and engage with others, they can begin to acknowledge what they're experiencing and share it with others, which can begin to release the trauma that's stuck in their nervous system, that's frozen in their nervous system. And this can lead to reconnection with the self and others, and help people learn how to manage their distress in ways that allow them to regain control over themselves, over their lives. And there's a number of different ways, different opportunities that you can use that are group and community-minded healing circles. We're going to hear basically about two different versions of that. Somatic healing, we'll hear about that. Expressive therapies, mindfulness-based, spiritual healing, nature-based, outdoor and memorial events, and clinical treatment. We'll talk all about that after we hear from the next presenters. But today I'm just really excited and thankful that the two people that are with us can share what they work on. And so first I want to introduce Elaine Miller-Karras, who's the co-founder and director of innovation to Trauma Resource Institute. And as I said, one of the co-founders of the ITRC, and still one of our core leaders on this effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Elaine. You're on mute.
I'll mute myself.
There we
Thank
go.
you so much for Bob for having me. He's given me some strict instructions to do this in 8 minutes, so I am going to do a good job, hopefully, doing this. I'm going to show you some slides to begin with, and I know that Reb's probably going to talk a little bit about the community resiliency model as well when she does her presentation, but I'm going to just go to that right now. Let me do the share. I've got it all ready to go. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the community resiliency model. And actually, after a number of years of going to many disasters, after the fact, we really decided to call what we were doing internationally as the Disaster Relief Mobilization Community Resiliency Model, because I wanted a catchy phrase, and it's called Dream CRIM, because Dreaming CRIM can help to bring healing to many communities. And we have had the honor to be present when we've seen communities create these great models of well-being and resilience. So the goals is to provide a structure for preparation to further strengthen resilience so communities can respond to events with strength, compassion, and with a common language. We want to create a cadre of community resiliency model teachers made up of professionals and natural leaders. And I'm going to underscore natural leaders, because many people who are having mental health challenges due to climate change may not be psychologically oriented. And they may, though, go to different community gatherings where wellness skills can be shared to scale throughout an entire community. And that's where the next point, we want to share with children, teens, adults within communities the skills. And I'll share a little bit about how that works. But the other part of what we do with Dream CRIM is we want to link the people that we are engaging in when they are preparing or after a disaster, to link community members and survivors to community-based programs and governmental entities that support prevention, resiliency, and reconstruction. And sometimes people don't know where to go. So these are the kinds of things that we've learned as we've been to so many different places. So what exactly is the community resiliency model? It's a set of 6 wellness skills, which can be used across the lifespan, yes, even with children, across cultures with different abilities, and also people from diverse backgrounds. The skills themselves, the model, what the model does is it serves both as a proactive measure to enhance community wellness and can be used during or after disasters. Like we've had a huge project in Ukraine that we are still ongoing with. Of course, the war is still going, but we've been actually able to do this through Zoom platforms, which actually has been a very eye-opening experience for me. And this can result in more adaptive thinking when facing emotional and physical distress. But I think the other thing that CRIM can be delivered individually in small dosages. And we've been looking at the dosage in terms of how much CRIM do you need to change. And we have randomized controlled trials that only after 1 hour of learning these CRIM skills, the nurses that were trained in CRIM, when they were looked at over time, had greater elements of well-being and had reductions in distress and secondary traumatic stress. And so CRIM can be used for self-care, but it also can be shared with others. So this is very important about what Bob was alluding to, and we really work hard in helping people understand these common reactions, that it's about your biology, not because you're mentally weak. So many people think that the reactions they have from their traumatic experiences has to do with there's something lacking in them. And we say, no, there's something right about you. This is happening to you because you are designed this way biologically to respond. So we educate people about the intricacies of biology and neurophysiology, about trauma, stress, and resilience. And there's so much now about the neuroscience of how we can cultivate our well-being. Individuals learning CRIM recognize the potential for restoring or enhancing well-being through this very simple strength-based approach. There's some of the things that Bob was talking about in the beginning of this session. What uplifts you? What brings you joy? What brings you peace? These are things that we can shift to when we're feeling in those moments of distress. And as I said, we're evidence-based. So there's 6 skills, and we say they're in the palm of your hand. So we have tracking, which is paying attention to the sensations connected to your resources. So if I tell you, oh, I love my granddaughter, she's the sweetest thing. We had the most wonderful Easter egg hunt at my house on Sunday. And when I think about her, the sensations inside my body, I don't know if you can see, I just stood up. I have warmth in my heart. I put my hand to my heart, and I'm just really bathed in well-being. So we have found that connecting your resources to your sensations is so important. And I'm so glad to hear how Bob is threading that through this whole series. So there's grounding, which many of us know, paying attention to yourself in the present moment. Middle finger is help now to reset now. When you're really bumped out of your well-being, how do you get back in? And these are very simple strategies. Gesturing is, we all have gestures connected to our well-being. When I'm distressed, I put my thumb on top of my other thumb and I just gently rub it, and I can feel my whole body relaxing. We help people identify what those might be. And then we do something very simple, shift and stay, shifting from distress to sensations of well-being. And the more we do that, the more we cultivate our well-being inside of us. And if you think you want to learn these skills, we have a free app. It's right now, it's in English, Spanish, and Ukrainian. And we're actually under development for a brand new updated app. We'll also have Arabic, Hebrew, Portuguese, and Japanese coming up. And we're hoping to add many languages as we go. It's completely free, and you can practice using this app. All right, let's move to the next one. Right, I'm doing good. So if you want to take a workshop, this is completely free. It's on Medscape. You could take it today after your course. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. The workshop is done by myself and Michael Sapp, our CEO of TRI, the Trauma Resource Institute. And there's also an additional 15-minute segment with Dr. Lindy Grabby and Dr. Ingrid Duva, who talk about the research. So you can do that today. And this gives you an idea. If you think, oh, well, how can I bring CRIM to my community? So the beginnings in this green area is 1 or more persons learn CRIM skills and become inspired and want to share with a wider community. So for example, in Bob, are you going to be having some folks that are coming from New Hanover County on your panel?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. They will tell you what we did. So Carrie Sipp, who was with PACES, said, Elaine, would you do a presentation to New Hanover County after Hurricane Florence so they can learn basic CRIM skills? I said, you bet I can. So I did that. So they learned about it. So then what happened next is contact a local CRIM teacher. They didn't have any then. So they thought about how can we bring CRIM to our community? So they were able to get funding through talking to a lot of their stakeholders and also identifying natural leaders. And they decided to go forward with the teacher training. So then this was before COVID. So we were able to give to them information about how to identify the best suited people to come to the community resiliency model teacher training who are already connected to their community. And so this is what we did. And now in New Hanover County, you're going to hear about them. I won't take any more time to talk about them, but what they're doing with creating a resilient community is absolutely amazing. And CRIM is one of the centerpieces. So you can learn more about our research, and I'm going to give you another little handout because my time is up. But again, there's much research that's been done regarding community mental health, and also working with frontline workers in terms of a randomized controlled trial. And I also have a book called Building Resiliency to Trauma, and also a workbook, but these are things, and they're going to be getting this, right? With all the different ways they can go and learn more about they can look up our research, and also the books that we have about our model, where you can learn about what we're doing around the world. Bob, I cannot believe that. I did it in 8 minutes. All right.
I think you did it in less than 8 minutes.
Oh my goodness, I put my timer on.
Right. Yeah, you have another 2 seconds if you want, but.
Oh my goodness. Well,
That's all
anyway,
right.
I
That's
just
all
want to thank you for having me come. And I have so much gratitude for everyone that's here, because I know that you're part of how we're going to create a better today and tomorrow by really being intentional in what we put together. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And we'll have a chance to ask Elaine questions and have a dialogue here in a second. But first, I want to introduce Ken Thompson, Dr. Ken Thompson, who's the CEO of the Visible Hands Collaborative. We'll give you a slightly different way to address healing. And Ken, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't know if you have slides or you just want to talk. Are you on mute? I don't see you there.
Bob, it actually looks like Ken dropped off,
Really? Huh.
unfortunately.
I wonder if he got cut off. Well, while he's either coming back or not, Elaine, can we talk about those other?
Sure.
Have people practice maybe shift and
Well,
stay or something.
let me, because I see that you've been doing this a lot. So one of the things that I have seen that's been very helpful around the globe is, and you talked about developing your resources already. Oh, here he's coming back.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So
I'll hold up on that.
We'll pick that up again.
Okay.
In the meantime, folks can put questions in the chat for Elaine for when we get to Q&A. And Bob, it looks like Ken's coming off mute, so you'll just be able to let him know that he's right up.
Yeah,
for his presentation.
welcome back. I hope your Zoom link is good, and we're turning it over to you to talk, share with the group for a few minutes.
How much time do I have? Just,
8 minutes.
8 minutes, perfect. All right, so I'm not going to show any slides. I'll just talk about what's called solidarity care and integrative community therapy. This is an innovation in terms of large group dialogic community therapy, I guess I would call it, where the fundamental notion is that people being in presence of community, that this is a healing process when people are able to talk about and share adversity and ways that they have learned to overcome it. Interestingly enough, this particular method emerged out of the favelas of Brazil. And it specifically comes from a favela in the northeast of Brazil in the city of Fortaleza. There's a giant favela of over 1 million people. And one section of that, a group of people started working now over 35 years ago. That favela is largely made up of people, and this is very topical for what we're talking about, of people who are refugees from the internal territories of Brazil, because when they were cutting down and increasing the pasture land and various other kinds of things, they were cutting down the jungle. And when they cut down the jungle, the whole area became desertified. So people had to flee. They are in fact climate refugees who are living in the favelas of Brazil. So they're living in Brazil in these favelas, which are, as you know, shanty towns. They're cardboard boxes. They're on land that's not owned, and in that process, they got engaged with a human rights lawyer who had a brother who happened to be a psychiatrist. And the human rights lawyer worked to kind of stop the police from coming in and knocking down the favela every couple of months. But he was there in the favela and noticed that there was a tremendous amount of social suffering, people dealing with violence, drugs, extreme depression, all kinds of psychiatric challenges, and no resources, at least at the clinical professional level, to deal with it. He asked his brother, a guy named Adalberto Barreto, to help him out. His brother happened to be a psychiatrist, and the brother came and showed up. And as you know, in a favela, there are no buildings, right? So he shows up, and what he finds is a line of 150 people who want to consult with him, who want to see him. Just lined out on the baking sun, there's maybe a little shade. And he goes to the woman in the front of the line. This is way back in 1985. Goes to the front of the line, and he talks to the woman there and asks her, what could he do to help her? And she says, "I can't sleep. I have no way to sleep." And he says, "Well, I could give you some medicine." And she says, "Don't even bother. I can't afford to feed my children. That's not going to help me." So he's like scratching his head. What am I going to do? How can I be helpful at all? When he notices that the person in the line behind her, there's no privacy, starts rubbing her shoulder. Another person in the line goes and gets her a chair. Another person brings her a cup of tea. And they all sort of get around her. And it turns out that this woman's husband had been murdered in front of her 3 weeks before that. And this was a mobilization of support in the community to help her deal with her mourning. What Alberto realized was that he might not be able to bring clinical care to the favela, but what he could bring and maybe help with was the development of a more formalized way that would allow people to develop their own internal capacities to support each other. He was very much influenced by a guy named Paulo Freire. I don't know if people are familiar with the work of Paulo Freire, and I see a few people nodding their heads. In Brazil, teaching peasants, campesinos, how to read. And what he found was that the most important thing was to have the campesinos talk about important things in their own lives with each other. And when they did that, they developed the motivation and the capacity to teach each other how to read. So he became quite famous with that, wrote a famous book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Adalberto and the favela worked together to create what we now call Integrative Community Therapy. It is a large group method, a dialogic method, and it has 5 simple steps. It's done by people who are not trained, professionals. We take people who are community health workers, or people who work in community organizations, or even just people who are in a neighborhood who want to be participants in this kind of activity. They get trained to do a very simple method. It takes a little time to get trained, but it's a simple method, and it's I'm going to describe it to you very quickly. We open up by starting to focus on something positive. Anything that's good that's happened to people, we ask people to share. We then go to ask the next question, and we use a couple of phrases that I think may be helpful to explain this. One of them is a Brazilian saying, when the mouth is silent, the body, when the mouth is silent, the body is sick. When the mouth speaks, the body heals. So, and another thing that they say is, it's a quote from, interestingly enough, Muhammad Ali. It's not the mountains up ahead of us that wear us down, it's the pebbles in our shoe. So in this public space, because it's a public space, this is what they call solidarity care. It's shared care among people. It's different than AA or NA. It's not trying to be an anonymous group. It's actually people come and they talk about not their secrets. We don't want people's secrets. We want the things that are the mundane, things that drive you crazy, the things that really make it hard for you on your day-to-day living. And people are asked to present some challenges that they've had in the last week. A couple people identify the challenge, and the group selects which challenge which has been extracted into a sort of universal. So somebody loses their grandmother, the shared conversation isn't about losing grandmother. It's about losing something or somebody really important to you that you want to deal with, you want to learn how to deal with. The group then picks which theme they want to talk about. And then what they do is they talk about themselves. Everybody only talks from the I. They talk about themselves and they say what they've experienced and what they did to overcome it, how they learned how to manage it. So you end up with people sharing many different strategies and ways of dealing with the emotional challenges that they are facing on a day-to-day basis in a way that allows people to develop linkages and connections, so that it is based on the premise that when people talk from their heart, from their emotions, that they are able to make connections with each other that are far stronger and deeper than when they're purely just working at an instrumental level. At the end of this session, these usually last about an hour to an hour and a half. At the end of this session, the people are asked, did you hear anything today that you're going to carry with you? And who did you hear it from? So everybody gets a chance to also hear how what they've said has been appreciated or made a mark on the people's lives in the community. These meetings happen in a community usually a couple times a week in Brazil. A primary care doc will see somebody and say, you seem to be emotionally distressed. I'm going to send you to see to work with the Integrative Community Therapy meeting that goes on at noon at the church courtyard, every Tuesday. And it's now part of the Brazilian health service that the community health workers are actually paid. This is part of their work, is to organize and run ICT sessions around the community. There are over 40,000 trained facilitators in Brazil. There are maybe 40 to 50 countries that have already started doing ICT. And we are now bringing ICT as a method to the United States and trying to help communities start to develop that interlinkage. You can do this online, and we're building it out right now in Pennsylvania, but we're looking for other places to bring this. And I'll just mention the way you can get to me and to more information about this. It's www.visiblehandscollaborative.org. www.visiblehandscollaborative.org. Christian Thompson got it exactly. Oh, I got a relative here helping me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And yeah, and we'll post that and make sure everybody has
Did I do that in
information.
8 minutes or close?
That was really close, so close enough. Both you and Elaine were great, and that leaves us with enough time now. So now let's just have a question and answer for Ken and Elaine, and have a dialogue. So if you would post questions, I see one or two already, but in chat, Christian will read them, and one or both of you can respond. I want to start with the first question, just to both of you. What's the best way? You sort of both suggested it, but what's the best way for a community group or a neighborhood group to reach out to your organization and get training in how to run your model, your approach? How can people do that?
Well, I'll say
Ken?
that people can go to our traumaresourceinstitute.com website. They can do a inquiry through our webpage, and then someone will get back to them about how they might be able to bring CRIM into their community. The other thing I really like to do is people sometimes say, well, I'd like to, but we need to know more about it. And we do a number of what we call our community resiliency model appetizers that will come into a community on a Zoom call like this for about 45 minutes and give an outline of what that might look like. Sorry.
Great.
And I'll just say, the website that we have is in the chat, and you can connect with us there. There's emails to, link it to send emails to us as well. I want to comment on the issue of art and music and nature. One of the key things about ICT is that in each transition, in the 5 steps that I outlined, we play music. We ask people to contribute poetry or stories or even jokes that fit with what they're trying to express when they talk about the challenges and the way they manage them. So we are looking always to make sure that the dialogue that's going forward is congruent with the community that it's occurring in, and that it's tied to and linked with distinctly with the resources, cultural resources of that community. The symbol, interestingly enough, of ICT is a spider, and the notion is the idea of a spider web connecting everybody. But why that's really important is that the Tremembé Indians who live in the region of Brazil that ICT comes from, and where the sort of history of healing circles has obviously long roots, that their symbol for connecting and communicating is the spider. So in that case, we're picking up on an indigenous reference and using it in the context of ICT.
And I'd just like to add that within the community resiliency model, a key aspect is working with the community and the culture, music, art. We also have many experiential experiences, which is about, for example, with your resources is drawings, bringing children, adults into drawing their resources and to experience what it's like to look at your resource and also to sense it on the inside. We do something with something called the Tree of Life, which is very inspiring in our community resiliency model, which is about the roots of the individual and how they're connected to the wider community, which I'm always inspired by what communities bring when they start identifying the resources that are inherent in every community. But sometimes, as one woman once said to me in the Philippines, thank you for reminding me what I already have but have forgotten. And sometimes I think that is exactly what we do, is remember that even though hard things are happening within communities, there are so many resources that can be brought in every element.
Thank you. Christian, you want to read a couple of questions?
Yes, thank you folks for touching on the examples of using art, music, and nature and similar healing opportunities. That's fantastic. Circling back to an earlier question, I saw it was addressed in the chat, but maybe just opening this up for the full group. This is for Elaine. Are there Dream Crim trainings available worldwide? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, we do trainings online. So because of that, and I think that was so startling for us. We didn't realize how many people wanted to take our trainings until COVID, and we went online. So we have CRIM teachers all over the world that come to us. One of the challenges is we have them on Eastern time zone, and we also have them on Pacific time zone. But recently we did one for Northern Ireland. And some of our folks were getting up pretty early here in California to do that. But we do make available to CRIM teachers throughout the world. We've done many CRIM teacher trainings for our Ukrainian colleagues, for example.
And I guess what I'll say about ICT is that our dilemma has been we're coming out of a Portuguese and to some degree Spanish language base. We have cultivated a number of English speakers with ICT recently, so we are in a position to do more trainings. We do them online. We are hoping to do some in person as time goes forward, and actually have been doing some in person in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. So there are ongoing ways to get trained and to develop this capacity. But it's, to be really honest with you, we're bringing something to the United States from the global South, and that's been an interesting challenge to sort of bring it and have people pay attention to it.
Christian, I want to hear another question from Chad in a second, but I want to first ask Ken a question. How is it that ICT grew to many other countries to become core elements of their healthcare systems? How did that take off? Do you know? And I'm wondering, is there a way to model that here?
I don't want to overstate it. It's being practiced in other countries. The place that's really embedded is in Brazil. And it's very, I run into Brazilians, just people on the street periodically, who've emigrated here from Brazil, and they will say, I've run into ICT. So it really does exist. It's out there in the world, and in fact being practiced in Ukraine right now, interestingly enough. So there's some connections here that we may want to share. But what Brazil did was that they looked at what happens when people go to ICT, and what they found was that people who referred to ICT tended not to have to go on for further clinical services. So, out of 100 people referred to ICT, 87 of them will have their challenge by whatever they experience in the ICT, and only 13 will go forward into some kind of clinical space, which has been really, really important to the Brazilians because their clinical space, just like ours, is very limited actually. And to get to a clinical resolution of all of the myriads of challenges that people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, it's just not feasible. So our hope is, and there's a question here about culture that I just want to mention very quickly. Having Americans, some groups of Americans, talk about their emotions publicly is a bit of a cultural challenge. Interestingly enough, Americans seem to crave it, but they just don't know and have the space in which to do it and what's been set up in a way that allows them to do it. So what we've been doing is working with community organizations to make this to something that's feasible, that they can organize and that they can introduce to people in a way that allows them to participate in these settings. Some other cultures in the United States get this right away, right? It's not a big challenge to get people together and to be in a position to talk a little bit more publicly about some of their emotions or to share some of their culture. The Brazilians, for example, if you put on music, they stand up and dance. In the United States, a lot of Americans, not all cultures, but some American cultures, you got to beg them just to say, okay, let's just move our hands a little bit to the music, let's try something like that. So it is a cultural phenomenon that we believe has general roots, but we have to unleash the American capacity for this to be expressed.
And can I just add one thing? One of the things I love about Bob's concept of purposing skills is that Kenneth can talk about what they're doing with ICT, and it's so important. And then I can say, on the other hand, we've seen where there are many people that are facing so many challenges in their life where they don't want to talk about their emotions. In fact, talking about their emotions is antithetical to what they want to do, but they is still interested in learning skills that will contribute to their well-being, that may be somatic or biologically based, that lead to the ability to have greater emotional expression, but it's not the portal of entry. So that's what we've seen with the community resiliency model that for me comes out of my heritage of my El Salvadoran mother, who would never have gone to a therapist. What if the priest would have said to her, Elsie, there is a class after Mass for your well-being and the well-being of your family, she would have been the first one to sign up. So I think that the advantage of looking at this with the umbrella of purposing skills is all these different things are important to have options for our communities.
Yeah, thank you both. And Christian, we'll hear from a couple other questions in a second, but I just want to say that thinking about the rural communities, the lower income communities, even in the US, and both Ken and Elaine, many people on the line today are from other countries, so they're not just from the US, but is really vital. There just aren't the therapists out there. There will never be enough therapists, any country, but in the US, especially rural areas, lower income areas, et cetera. And 50%, the research shows 50% of the public, as you've just sort of said, won't go to see a for many different reasons, fears of stigmatization, et cetera. So these approaches are just vital to really address, especially when we start to get more and more traumas. So Christian, do you have any other questions you can read?
Yeah, I want to thank our guests for being so proactive, both in the chat and verbally here. It's generating a lot of excitement, all this great work, and we have some participants interested in maybe some tips regarding how to get trained in some of these modalities and practice methods, and maybe getting involved.
Well, I'll just say what I already did say about the Trauma Resource Institute. The other thing is that I want people to know that we have a sliding fee scale for our community resiliency model teacher training, which is 5 days long. And so even if you say, oh my goodness, the $2,000 is a lot, because it's not just the 5 days of training, it's also we're with you in terms of all sorts of materials, et cetera, but we don't turn people away because they can't pay. So we have a sliding fee scale. So if you go to our website and say, oh, I don't know if I could really do that, please check with us anyway. The other thing that has recently happened is we've become a contractor for part of the United Nations, and we just finished a training for this country of Angola. We've trained 50 CRIM teachers that was funded by the United Nations. And so the goal of these young people are to work with their youth And that particular goal was to mitigate the number of teen pregnancies that are happening within the country. But when we've seen that when we train, like, let's say with that particular purpose, the community resiliency model skills work with so many different areas, and we're already getting feedback from our CRIM teachers in Angola, how incredibly helpful it is for many aspects of their life. But Ken, I'm thinking about the Portuguese, you know, because we found out that the Portuguese that they speak in Angola is not like the Portuguese from Portugal. It's more like the Portuguese from Brazil. There you go.
Yeah, we are, as I said, expanding our capacities to do training, and please, check out our website. Our trainings probably take about somewhere between 30 and 40 hours of kind of didactic sort of stuff. But in that didactic, there's already, you start doing ICTs. And then what we hope to do is over time is to work with folks to super go through the process of doing ICTs and then dealing with the challenges that running a group always presents. So we are in an expansion mode. We're hoping to continue to go forward, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it here and be in the midst of such great work around disaster response and dealing with the aftermath. And we have much more to talk about. And thanks, Bob, for getting us together. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Do you have time for one or two more questions real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, Christian, let's just go one or two, then we'll end it there. We will take other questions that we've had and send them to you if it's okay, and you can respond just in brief comments, and we'll post it on the website for everybody to read. But Christian, go ahead and read at least one more question.
We may have hit all of our questions here. Had a schedule today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
Great.
Can I just say that I love to see in the chat that the state of Oregon has, I guess, adopted the iChill app. Is that true? Someone, I think, Tara, if you could tell me about that. I love that that they've done that. So that very progressive state that Bob's from.
Yes. So I'm with the state of Oregon with the Department of Human Services, and we have a wellness, I guess, department, and they do a lot of work around employee wellness, but also how to assist our clients that we're serving. And the iChill app is one of them that's approved to be on our DHS, our state iPhones, which is it's really hard to get an app approved to be put on our phone. So.
Well,
so I think it's really cool. Yeah. And yes, so we're encouraged to use it not only for ourselves but for our clients. So I just want
that having you from Oregon here and having something going on around wellness is an inspiration for me to say what I'm about to say. A week ago, I had the opportunity to speak from somebody from Ohio who was calling me about. Unfortunately, there's a rash of suicides among refugees in Columbus, Ohio, and they were interested actually in seeing if ICT might be something that would be part of a response to that, as well as to the fact that I live in Pittsburgh, where we also have a large number of Bhutanese refugees. This is a particular group. So we were sharing ideas about what to do about their loss and their challenge. But what was interesting on top of all that horrible challenge was the fact that I was getting this call from the Office of Prevention and Mental Health Promotion in the state government Office of Mental Health in Ohio. And I sat there and I thought for a moment about the last time I had spoken to somebody in the state of Pennsylvania about mental health promotion and prevention. And I realized that I live in Pittsburgh, as I said, I have never spoken to anybody from that office because that office does not exist. And I think that it's something that we may want to look at in the context of the work, Bob, that you're doing, that the states don't actually have a framework for thinking about this and putting it in a place where they could use it. And this may be a potential model, and maybe going on in other states that I'm just unaware of. But it was striking to me that I had never had that conversation before and was thrilled to do it.
Thank you, Ken. Go ahead, Elaine.
I think there are more states that are thinking. I think we have a number of CRIM teachers in the state of Oregon, and they have big plans in bringing CRIM to many parts of their community. But I think there are more states that are thinking about this. I've certainly seen, and you're going to hear from North Carolina about the things they're doing in North Carolina that are just exemplary of, I think, what could be replicated throughout the world, actually.
Yeah, just a sidebar, we'll have to wrap it up here, but you might remember that we've got the Community Mental Wellness and Resilience Act introduced in Congress. When we first wrote the bill, we had the establishment of an Office of Mental Wellness and Resilience, Prevention, Mental Wellness and Resilience in the bill. But we got such big pushback then, they said, take it out and let's just try to get this little grant program going. Because the federal government does not, there's different elements that do prevention here and there, but there isn't really a major focus on it there. And so it's really needed at all levels. Thank you for bringing that up. I want to thank you both for joining us today. We are going to take other questions and I'll send them to you by email. And if you can take a second to respond, that'd be great. And thank you both for all the outstanding work you continue to do and your organizations do. Thank you kindly so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Appreciate
all.
it.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, so let's go into breakout rooms now. Thanks, Ken. Take care. And just we'll talk for a few minutes about what did you take away from Elaine and Ken's talk? Can you think about how you can implement their different methods in your community or neighborhood, and any issues, key issues? And again, if there's other questions that emerge, we'll send them to Ken and Elaine afterwards, and they'll send their answers back, and we'll post it as we have with others. So I'm going to turn it over, excuse me, turn it over to Jesse to just create 10-minute breakout rooms. See you in 10 minutes. Take care. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good talk among each other. And if there's any comments that people have, if you put those in chat, we'll take a few minutes and just read something back. If you have anything that stood out in your breakout room, please put that in chat. And Christian, just share a couple of key issues or points that might have been made, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Anything popping in there? One of the things that we were talking about, just the four of us, while breakout rooms were going on, was the fact that Ken and the ITC model, ICT model, are really struggling, as Ken said, to get this translated into the English world, English speaking world. So, but I've sat through a number of their training workshops or participated in them, and they do a great job. So I would really encourage you all to think about how you can get involved with that, and also with Elaine's models. They're both really excellent ways to help people build resilience and heal from any kind of traumas they're experiencing. Christian, anything we want to share? Anybody post anything?
Well, Pam, I know you mentioned it's just lamenting, but I think this is a worthy question to maybe pose to the group and to Bob. If we have any ideas how to get funding to implement any of these, wonderful options we heard about today.
Great question. Of course, that's the $1,000 question that we all face. I think my reaction is, again, anybody else has thoughts, please post them. Obviously, the ITRC is working on the federal bill to try to get funding for these kinds of initiatives. But I think you have to go and talk to local donors, local individuals that might be able to, but you could put together a crowdfunding strategy and say, we want to do this for these people. And you might be able to raise it in that way. Talk to local foundations, if there are some philanthropic foundations, and or join with another group, another organization that might have a funding source, and see if you can add your grant possibility for funding these kind of projects onto theirs and get funding if it's an established organization and has funding, and or go to city, county, state funding, mental health, social service funding sources and see what they are. So you just have to, with funding in general, fundraising, you just got to get creative and just keep at it. Ask everybody in the world and see what pops up. The other
And Teddy,
question?
thank you so much for dropping that resource in the chat as well. Just looking over their website briefly here, it looks like a fantastic resource, and I want to thank you for including that. If anyone has any other comments or questions, please feel free to include them in the chat.
And while we do that, why don't we just go on a little bit, talk about a few other things. So as I mentioned, there's a number of different ways to help residents heal traumas. And the way we organize the community practice, it's hard to sort of sometimes break it up. Ken mentioned healing circles. That's a very powerful approach. And actually, ICT is a form of a healing circle, and that is when 5 to 100 people get together and share what's going on within them, as well as hear from others how they're dealing with these, et cetera. That's what different versions of a healing. The Center for Mind-Body Medicine, you heard from Matt Erb earlier in the community practice. That's sort of what they do in some ways, but then they teach specific skills. Another approach was the convivial gatherings in Sonoma County after the wildfires a number of years back with Latinos and Latinas. People were distressed because of not only having homes and property damage, but also the smoke, et cetera, et cetera. But the Latinx population many of them were not going to want to talk, engage in therapy. So they would hold picnics and get-togethers after work where people just brought food together, did a potluck, and just ran through basically what Ken talked about. Everybody would sort of begin to share what they're experiencing and hear from others. And it was all informal. There was nothing in their promotion about it that talked about mental health, et cetera. And it became a very powerful tool. The National Compadres Network also runs those kinds of initiatives, healing circles, and there's Healing Circles Global that does that kind of work. So you might want to check all those out. There's many kinds of somatic healings, the community resilience model of Elaine's model. Some of that is somatic. There's expressive therapies, art, drama, music, et cetera. Just thinking about your community or your neighborhood, what would people resonate with? What would be something that makes sense to them, that they have the resources to get going, and see if you can find people who can start those. There's mindfulness. I'm going to come back to clinical therapy in a second. Mindfulness-based healing. I'm a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor, and I know it can be very, very powerful, but it's only for a few kinds of people. Not everybody's going to go to that kind of thing. There's other kinds of mindfulness. There's spiritual healings, religious-based healings, very important for many people. Nature-based and animal therapies can be very powerful, helping people get connected to pets or fostering pets, et cetera, can be very powerful. And memorial events and rituals are also very important for healing. And what we mean by that is to have the community come together to celebrate 6 months or a year after, or acknowledge after a major event occurred in the community, and talk about who was lost, but also share and celebrate the resilience people showed and the support they showed, et cetera. And doing that on a regular basis can be very, very powerful. So there's a number of different ways. And as you get a resilience coordinating network together, you ought to have a strategy to make sure that one or more of these kinds of opportunities is available in your neighborhood, in your community, based on the age, demographic makeup of the and resources available in your community. Because especially on an ongoing basis, this is going to be really important. And again, getting funding to support those is going to be vital. So looking at those opportunities. Okay, why aren't you moving now? Well, I can't get this to go. There we go. Okay, so what about mental health treatment? It is going to remain important. You saw on the chart that I had that there's still going to be important for people who can access it, who have the resources, et cetera. But we have to remember that the number of certified professionals, as I said, is never going to be sufficient to address all the people that are traumatized as this climate emergency worsens. Most of them that do exist, most of you and us, me, that exist, we list in wealthier urbanized areas, suburban areas, not low income or BIPOC communities or rural areas. And again, due to fears of stigmatization, being treated inequitably, conflicts with spiritual religious beliefs, high cost, the high cost of co-pays even. Research shows, I guess it's officially like 48% of the people, the research that I saw, will not go to get mental health services, even when they could use them. And many clinicians themselves, many of us, are going to be traumatized by these climate events. So the important for us ourselves to engage in these healing opportunities. And just as importantly, treating symptoms may not work very well when these social ecologically generated disasters and stresses continue, and especially when they're reinforced by social norms, economic practices, and policies that work against, that create this trauma-organized society that we are in. So this is why group and community-minded healing opportunities must be the priority. Individual mental health services will remain important, but we've got to focus on group and community-minded healing. And it's really going to be important to focus on peer-based assistance. As you just heard, both of them train regular citizens to do this work. And as Father Abernathy said last week, he trains the importance of training community health deputies, not just certified community health workers. It's going to be really important to train and engage deputies. I'm not going to read all these, but when you training and empowering local residents who are trusted members of the community, who have a good understanding of and relationship with other peers, that is, with other residents, that is, peers, they can do all sorts of things. They can lead these mental wellness and resilience gatherings and exercises that can help people get access to supports and resources. They can give informal counseling and guidance on health behaviors. They can advocate for different groups for justice and equity. And I'll go on. We don't have time to go on the rest of them, but I encourage you to read this, that it's really going to be vital to train local peers to lead much of the efforts as the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity catastrophe grows. That we can't rely on us experts, because there's not ever going to be enough of us, and we're going to be overwhelmed as it is. We really have to get the peers engaged. One of the vital things, in fact, is the last one and we've seen this already in the resilience networks going on. It's when you have these peers that are engaged with activities out in the community, they can come back and give feedback to the Resilience Coordinating Network Steering Committee on what's working and what's not working, and what is needed still in the community. So it's a way to really get good, honest feedback rather than thinking you really know what's happening. So I just want to reemphasize that the peer-based approach is really going to be critical. So in closing, if you want CE credits, remember to complete the APHA session evaluation you will receive. Next Tuesday's session, a week from today, will include a panel of people involved with community resilience initiatives, resilience building initiatives, and please think about questions you have now after sitting through these past 8 weeks that you want to ask them. Many of them are people who we've spoken with, but one person is from the New Hanover County, North Carolina Resiliency Task Force. She'll have, that's really doing outstanding work. She'll be with her too. Reb McKenzie, who's many of you now know, is going to make a short presentation about the project she developed based on the previous community practices. And then again, the final session, the final special session will be the following Thursday, not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And it's going to focus on the role public officials can play, government officials, government agencies, et cetera, in supporting a resilience coordinating council. We have 2 different people who are going to discuss their work, one from from Virginia, one from Washington State. So really be prepared for that, and I hope you can attend. So here's your homework. I'd like you to develop a draft action plan for how you will begin to assist an existing resilience network or form a new one in your neighborhood or community. That includes who you're going to discuss forming a resilience network with and organizing a planning team with a date as to when you're going to do it. combine that with your elevator speech. That is, how would you describe in very simple terms why you want to form a resilience network, your vision of success, what the outcomes bill, and make a list of the initial grassroots, neighborhood, civic, faith, spirituality, education, youth, and other public, private, and public nonprofit organizations you think should be involved. So try to develop that if you would, and because we're going to talk about those next week. So with that, I hope that you found today's session useful, and I wish you all a very good week, and we look forward to seeing you in a week from today. Thank you kindly. Everybody take care.